I've always believed my house had an unsettling air about it, but as a single father, it's what I could afford. A quaint, slightly aged two-story house in a quiet part of town. My son Tommy is my world. A bright, imaginative 6-year-old with an infectious laugh and a heartwarming smile. But recently, Tommy started having nightmares. Every night, he would wake up crying, petrified of the dark. I did what any father would do, comforted him, read him bedtime stories, and assured him that monsters didn't exist. Yet his fear persisted. Tonight was like any other. After our usual bedtime routine, Tommy looked up at me with his big, fearful eyes and said, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." Humoring him, I knelt down and peered under the bed. What I saw froze my blood. There, under the bed, was another Tommy, identical in every way, staring back at me, his eyes wide with terror. He was quivering and whispered, "Daddy, there's somebody on my bed." I jerked back in shock, my heart pounding in my chest. Rational thoughts battled with sheer panic. Was this a trick? A dream? I looked back at the Tommy on the bed, who seemed oblivious to the one beneath. Gathering my courage, I asked the Tommy under the bed, "Who are you?" His voice was a mere whimper. "I'm Tommy, Daddy. Please, you have to believe me." I was torn. Both Tommies seemed real, terrified, and equally convincing. The air felt thick, charged with a sinister energy. I needed to act to protect my son, but which one was he? I decided to ask them something only the real Tommy would know. "What did we do last Sunday?" The Tommy on the bed answered first. "We went to the park and had ice cream." The one under the bed said the same, his voice shaky. Both answers were correct. My mind raced. Then I remembered. Tommy had fallen and scraped his knee that day. I lifted the Tommy on the bed's pajama leg. No scrape. I looked at the one under the bed. He timidly showed me his knee, the scrape still fresh. I pulled the real Tommy from under the bed, my heart pounding. The other Tommy just sat there, smiling eerily. "Daddy, what's going on?" my real son asked, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, Tommy. But we need to get out of here," I said, grabbing his hand. We rushed downstairs, but the front door wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself was trapping us. I could feel a dark presence, like we were being watched. Tommy's grip tightened. "Daddy, I'm scared." "So am I, Tommy. So am I whispered, trying to sound braver than I felt. We decided to hide in the kitchen, the only room with a small window. As we sat there huddled together, we heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the stairs. It was the other Tommy, but his eyes were different now, darker, more menacing. "Come play with me, Tommy." It called out in a voice that was both Tommy's and not. I held my son close, my mind racing. How could I protect him? What was this thing? Then I remembered the old stories the previous homeowner had told me about the house. Tales of strange occurrences, unexplained disappearances. I'd laughed them off then, but now they seemed terrifyingly relevant. The other Tommy was now outside the kitchen, scratching at the door. I looked around frantically and saw the old gas stove. A risky plan formed in my mind. I whispered instructions to Tommy, telling him to be ready to run as soon as I opened the window. I then turned on the gas and waited, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, I lit a match, threw it, and grabbed Tommy, rushing to the window. The explosion was deafening, the heat immense. We tumbled out into the cold night air, the house erupting in flames behind us. We ran to the nearest neighbor's house, not looking back. The fire department came, but there was little they could do. The house burned to the ground, the other Tommy with it. The official report said it was a gas leak, but I knew the truth. That house held something dark, something evil, and I had brought my son into it. We're far from that place now, living in a new town, in a new house. But sometimes at night I wake up in a cold sweat, Tommy's words echoing in my ears. "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." And every time I do, As the clock struck midnight, the chill in the morgue seemed to deepen, creeping into my bones despite the decade I had spent working the night shift. The place, with its sterile walls and the constant low hum of refrigeration units, had always felt more like a tomb than a workplace. That night, however, there was an unsettling edge to the silence. "Can you get me a blanket, please? It's really cold here," a voice whispered, slicing through the stillness. Startled, I looked around. The voice was soft and feminine, tinged with a shiver that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It seemed to echo off the cold, tiled walls, emanating from nowhere and everywhere at once. I glanced at the row of white-sheeted figures on the stainless steel tables. They were my silent companions, the departed souls entrusted to my care until their final journey. Laughing nervously, I tried to shake off the feeling. Working alone at night, your mind plays tricks on you. I'd learned that the hard way. I reached for my earphones, hoping to drown out the eerie quiet with some music. But as I put them on, the voice came again, more insistent this time. "Please, it's so cold." I froze. This wasn't my imagination. The voice was real, clear as crystal, and it was coming from the direction of the tables. My heart pounded in my chest as I slowly turned around. There, on the second table from the left, lay a young woman. I remembered her, a Jane Doe, found earlier that day. She looked peaceful, her features serene under the harsh fluorescent lights. But it was impossible. She was dead. I approached the table, my steps hesitant. "This is ridiculous," I muttered to myself. "Dead people don't talk." But as I drew closer, I saw her chest rise and fall ever so slightly under the white sheet. My breath caught in my throat. She was alive. In a panic, I reached for my phone to call for help. But before I could dial, a cold hand gripped my wrist. It was her hand, pale and cold, but unmistakably alive. Her eyes, dark and empty, stared into mine. "You left me here, cold, alone," she whispered, her voice a chilling caress. I tried to pull away, but her grip was surprisingly strong. "You're dead," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Her lips twisted into a grotesque smile. "Am I?" she hissed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop further, and I could see my breath in the air. I struggled against her grip, but it was like trying to move a mountain. Her eyes bore into mine, and in them I saw my own fear reflected. Then she spoke again, her voice a hollow echo. "You ignore us, treat us like objects, but we are still here, feeling the cold, hearing your words, longing for warmth." Her grip tightened, and I felt an icy chill spreading from her hand into my body. My mind raced with terror. This couldn't be happening. Dead people don't talk, don't move. But here she was, holding me with a strength that defied the grave. I looked around desperately, hoping to find something, anything, to free myself. But the morgue was empty, save for the two of us. And then, I heard it. A soft whisper like a chorus of the damned coming from the other bodies. They were all speaking now, their voices a symphony of despair and longing. "We are cold, so cold. Help us. Why did you leave us here?" The voices surrounded me, enveloping me in a cacophony of sorrow. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move, unable to scream. The woman's grip was like ice, and I felt my strength ebbing away. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The woman's grip loosened, and I stumbled back, gasping for air. The voices ceased, leaving behind a deafening silence. I looked at the woman on the table, but she was as she had been before. Still, lifeless, a corpse. I ran from the morgue, not stopping until I was outside in the cool night air. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Had it been real? Or had I finally succumbed to the isolation and eerie nature of my job? I never returned to the morgue. I couldn't. The memories of that night haunted me, the voices echoing in my dreams. I took a job during the day, surrounded by the living, but the chill of that night never quite left me. Sometimes, when it's quiet, I can still hear her voice, whispering through the shadows. It's so cold here. And I wonder if the dead are ever truly at rest, or if they linger, trapped between worlds, forever cold, forever alone. The last thing I remember before it all went dark was the cold, damp soil being thrown over my face. Panic had gripped me, my heart pounding against my ribcage like a caged bird desperate for escape. But no matter how much I screamed and thrashed, the dirt kept coming, burying me alive. The darkness enveloped me, a suffocating blanket of earth and despair. For what felt like an eternity, I lay there in my premature grave, each breath a laborious task. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of moist soil and decay. I tried to keep calm, to conserve the little oxygen I had, but panic was a constant companion, whispering horrors in my ear. Then, a sound broke through the oppressive silence, the distinct noise of someone, or something digging. At first it filled me with an indescribable sense of relief. Rescue. Someone had realized the mistake. They were coming to save me from this earthen tomb. My heart, which had slowed to a sluggish pace, began to race with renewed hope. But that hope was short-lived. As the sound grew clearer, a chilling realization dawned on me. The digging wasn't coming from above, from the world of the living. It was coming from below me, deeper in the earth, from a place where no living person should be. At first I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal, a burrowing creature that had sensed my presence. But the more I listened, the more human the action seemed. The rhythmic scraping of what could only be hands, the muffled grunts of effort. The sound grew closer and closer, a relentless scratching that seemed to echo in the cramped confines of my grave. I wanted to scream, to bang against the wooden lid of the coffin in a desperate plea for help, but fear paralyzed me. What kind of creature lived beneath the earth, digging its way towards the dead? Then, something touched the bottom of my coffin. A thud, soft yet unmistakable. The digging stopped, replaced by a more terrifying sound, a gentle tapping, as if whatever was beneath me was now trying to break through. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tensed for what was to come. The wood beneath me creaked ominously, and I braced for the coffin to give way, to come face to face with whatever nightmare awaited me in the depths. But then, something even more bizarre happened. A voice, muffled but unmistakably human, floated up through the wood. "Are you there?" it asked, a whisper of sound that made my blood run cold. I couldn't respond, my voice a prisoner of my terror. The voice continued, a note of desperation creeping into its tone. "Please, you must help me. I've been trapped down here for so long." Trapped? The word echoed in my mind, a beacon of confusion in the darkness. Who was this person, and how had they ended up buried beneath the ground? "I can hear you breathing," the voice insisted, growing more frantic. "Please, I don't have much time. They'll come back for me soon." They. A new wave of horror washed over me. There was more than one of these things? The voice became a pleading whimper. "Help me, please, I can't endure this any longer." Against my better judgment, my fear, I found my voice. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "A victim, like you," the voice replied. "They buried me here, left me for dead. But I survived somehow. I've been digging ever since, trying to find a way out." Their story mirrored my own, a tale of terror and survival against impossible odds. But something didn't feel right. The earth was silent now. No sound of the others this person claimed were coming for them. "Why are you underneath me?" I asked, my curiosity overcoming my fear. There was a pause, a hesitation that sent shivers down my spine. "I've been moving through the earth, following the sounds of the living. I heard you being buried, heard your cries. I thought maybe we could help each other." The idea was madness, two buried souls trying to escape their shared tomb. But what choice did I have? I was already buried alive. What worse fate could await me? "Okay," I said, my voice stronger now. "What do we need to do?" The voice instructed me to push against the lid of my coffin, to try and create a gap. With every ounce of strength I possessed, I pushed against the heavy wood, feeling it creak and groan under my efforts. "There's a little space now," the voice said excitedly. "I can reach through. Give me your hand." I hesitated, the thought of touching this unknown subterranean dweller filling me with dread. But the instinct to survive, to escape this grave, was stronger. I reached down, my fingers brushing against something cold and clammy. The shock of the contact made me recoil, but the voice urged me on. "Don't be afraid. I'm here to help." I gripped the cold hand, its grip surprisingly strong. Together, we pushed against the coffin lid, the wood finally giving way with a loud crack. Fresh air flooded in, the sweetest scent I had ever known. I could see a faint light above me, the outside world beckoning. But as I clambered out of the grave, assisted by my mysterious savior, I realized the horrible truth. The hand that had helped me, it wasn't human at all. It was something else, something ancient and decayed, attached to a being that lurked in the shadows of the open grave. I stumbled back in horror, realizing too late the true nature of my rescuer, a creature of the earth, something forgotten and left to dwell in the darkness below. And as I looked around, the moon casting eerie shadows across the graveyard, I saw them, more graves, all freshly dug, waiting for their next occupants. I had escaped my grave, but I was far from safe. The creature moved towards me, a twisted smile on its withered face. "Thank you," it rasped. "You've freed me, but now they'll need a replacement." Panic set in as I turned to run, the sounds of digging all around me. The graveyard was alive with them, the buried, the forgotten, all clawing their way to the surface. I didn't look back, my only thought to escape this nightmare. But as I fled into the night, the chilling realization set in. I was not the only one buried alive, and the horrors beneath the earth were now free to roam. As I sat in the dimly lit corner of the bar, the cacophony of clinking glasses and the distant sound of an electric guitar filled the air. The opening act was a local band, one my friend had been raving about for weeks. She practically dragged me out of the house, insisting that we couldn't miss their performance. The night was lively, with the bar packed and the music electrifying. We found ourselves a small table near the back, a perfect spot to enjoy the show and chat. A couple of drinks in, I reached into my pocket for my phone, wanting to capture a snippet of the band's performance. My heart sank as I realized it wasn't there. Panic set in. I retraced my steps, our table, the bar, the bathrooms, but found nothing. Borrowing my friend's phone, I dialed my number, hoping someone had found it and would pick up. After 2 rings, a voice answered. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It was low, raspy, almost inhuman, followed by a giggle that sent chills down my spine. Then, the line went dead. I tried again, but there was no answer. The evening quickly lost its charm. My mind raced with thoughts of my lost phone and that eerie voice. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Eventually, I decided to call it a night, the unease growing with each passing minute. As I reached home, the house was dark and silent. I trudged to my room, mentally preparing to deal with the lost phone in the morning. But there, on my nightstand, was my phone, lying innocently where I had left it. Confusion washed over me. How was that possible? Who had answered my phone? I picked it up, half expecting it to ring or for that voice to laugh at me again. But it was just my phone, as normal as ever. I checked the call log, and there it was, the outgoing call to my number, the one I made from the bar. It didn't make any sense. I tried to sleep but found myself tossing and turning, the giggle echoing in my mind. The next morning, I brushed it off as a bizarre prank or a strange glitch. Life went on. But something had shifted. I began receiving anonymous texts, each one more unsettling than the last. Pictures of places I frequented, messages with details only I would know, and always ending with that same disturbing giggle in written form. Hey, hey, hey. I changed my number, but the texts continued. I became paranoid, looking over my shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound. My nights were plagued with nightmares, the same raspy voice haunting me in my dreams. I was losing my grip on reality, the lines between what was real and what wasn't blurring. One night I decided to confront this nightmare head-on. I stayed up, phone in hand, waiting for the next text. At exactly 3:33 a.m., my phone vibrated. It was a picture of the bar from last night, and the text read, "Come outside, hey, hey, hey." My heart pounding, I hesitantly made my way to the door. As I opened it, the cold night air hit me, and I felt an eerie presence. The street was empty, the silence oppressive. I glanced at my phone and it lit up with a new message. "Turn around." I slowly turned, and there it was. A figure stood at the edge of my yard, shrouded in darkness. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me. It raised its hand, gesturing for me to come closer. Paralyzed with fear, I stood there, unable to move or scream. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure vanished. The streetlight flickered, and I was alone again. Rushing inside, I locked the door and collapsed against it, my breath ragged and heart racing. From that night on, the texts stopped. The phone calls ceased, but the fear remained. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of a presence lurking just out of sight. My nights were restless, and the days were long. I never found out who or what was behind those calls and texts. The incident at the bar, the phone on my nightstand, that figure in the night. It all remained an unsolved mystery, a chilling reminder of the night my life changed forever. The fear of the unknown, the unseen presence always lurking, became a constant in my life, a shadow I could never quite escape.